My name is Eliza, and for 12 years, I built my life alongside David, believing the structure we had created was permanent, a monument to stability and mutual respect. He was an architect, a man who thought in terms of load-bearing walls and foundational integrity. And I suppose I applied that same principle to our marriage. I thought it was solid, built to last a lifetime. The truth, I would learn, is that the most dangerous flaws are often invisible, hidden beneath layers of paint and pretty wallpaper, and the collapse, when it comes, is never where you expect it. Our life was a comfortable, well-appointed room. David was kind, reliable, and wonderfully consistent. He left for work at 7:15 a.m., his kiss on my cheek as regular as the sunrise. He returned at 6:30 p.m., his briefcase containing the blueprints of other people's dreams. We discussed our days over dinners I prepared with a quiet, growing sense of routine. We talked about the news, about his projects, about the new exhibit at the gallery where I worked as a curator. Our conversations were pleasant, but they skimmed the surface of a deep, still ocean. I felt like I was living in a beautiful, silent film, where every gesture was understood but nothing was truly said. I was 38, and the silence in our house had begun to echo the silence I felt growing inside of me. It wasn't that I was unhappy, it was that I was no longer sure I was alive. Then Julian walked into the gallery. He was a storm of energy and questions. A writer with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder and a curiosity that felt like a physical force. He wasn't just looking for a piece to write about. He was searching for the story behind the brushstrokes, the emotion in the clay. He turned to me, and his gaze was so direct, so unguarded, it felt like a spotlight. "You have a real connection to this work," he said, his voice low and earnest. "It's not just a job for you, is it? You feel it." In that moment, under that simple observation, the carefully constructed wall of my contentment developed its first hairline crack. David saw my job as a pleasant way to fill my days. Julian saw it as an extension of my soul. Our friendship began with art. He would come by the gallery and we would talk for hours about color theory and the use of light in the Impressionists, about the brutal honesty of modern sculpture. He listened to my opinions as if they were revelations. He remembered things I'd said weeks before. With David, I felt like a cherished piece of furniture. Comfortable, familiar, but static. With Julian, I felt like a masterpiece being rediscovered. The attention was a drug, and I became an addict. I started to manufacture reasons to see him. A late meeting to discuss a potential acquisition, a networking lunch with a local art critic. The lies came easily, too easily, each one layering over my guilt until it was just a dull background noise. I told myself it was innocent. I was just feeding a part of myself that had been starving. It was intellectual, a meeting of minds. But the heart has a way of hijacking the mind's best intentions. A coffee meeting stretched into a 2-hour walk. A walk turned into a plan to visit a museum in the next city over. "It's for research," I told myself, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm that belied the calmness of my lie. I was embarking on a great adventure, and the thrill of it, the sheer unpredictability, was intoxicating. Julian was spontaneous. He would call and say, "The sky looks incredible today. Let's go watch the sunset from the old bridge." And I would go, concocting a story for David about a broken down car or a last-minute request from my boss. My husband, my predictable, steady David, would just nod and say, "Be careful, dear." His trust felt like a weight, and I shrugged it off with increasing ease. The affair turned physical during a weekend conference I had invented. It wasn't a passionate, dramatic consummation. It was a quiet, inevitable slipping over a line I had been dancing along for weeks. In a bland hotel room 50 miles from home, the last of my resolve crumbled. Afterwards, as I lay there, the guilt was a cold, sharp stone in my stomach. But Julian turned to me, brushed the hair from my face, and whispered, "You deserve to be happy, Eliza. You deserve to feel this alive." And I wanted to believe him so desperately that I let his words become my truth. I packed the guilt away, compartmentalizing it like a dangerous secret in a locked room. I became a master of duality. At home, I was David's wife, discussing mortgage rates and grocery lists. With Julian, I was Eliza, a woman of passion and depth, finally living her truth. This double life continued for months. I lived in a constant state of heightened awareness, my senses attuned to the ping of a secret text message, the smell of Julian's cologne on my clothes, the need to keep my stories perfectly aligned. I was so focused on maintaining my deception that I became blind to the subtle shifts in my own home. I didn't notice that David was working later more often. I dismissed his quiet preoccupation as stress from a big project. I was the center of my own thrilling, treacherous universe, and I failed to see that the quiet architect I had taken for granted was also observing, calculating, and building something of his own. The first real crack in my fabricated world appeared on a perfectly ordinary Thursday. I came home flushed from an afternoon with Julian, my mind still replaying his words, his touch. David was in his study, the blueprints on his desk replaced by his tablet. He looked up as I entered, and his expression was unreadable. A blank page where I was used to seeing simple affection. "You're back," he said, his voice flat. "The traffic was terrible. I lied. The word's automatic now. I think there was an accident on the freeway." He nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving my face. "I see." He picked up his tablet, his thumb stroking the screen almost thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about our future, Eliza." My heart stuttered. Our future? Yes. About foundations. About what happens when the ground beneath you isn't as solid as you thought. He spoke in his usual measured tone, but the words felt loaded, dangerous. In my work, when we discover a flaw in the foundation, we don't just patch it up. We have to assess the entire structure. Sometimes the only solution is a controlled demolition. A cold trickle of fear traced its way down my spine. "That sounds dramatic," I managed to say, forcing a light laugh that sounded hollow even to me. "Not dramatic," he corrected softly. "Necessary." It's about integrity. A building that looks sound on the outside can be dangerously compromised within. It's a liability to itself and to everyone in it. He stood up, placing the tablet face down on the desk. "I ordered Chinese. It's in the kitchen." He walked out, leaving me standing in the doorway, my legs feeling weak. That was the moment the thrill curdled into pure, undiluted fear. The silence in the house was no longer comfortable. It was accusatory. I felt the walls closing in, not as a cage, but as a structure I had myself weakened. I had been so busy looking out the window at a more exciting view that I had failed to notice the cracks spreading across my own ceiling. The controlled demolition was coming, and I had a terrifying feeling that David was not just the architect, but also the one holding the detonator. The dream was over, and I was suddenly, chillingly awake. The silence after that Thursday became a new, terrifying language that only David and I understood. It was a vocabulary of unspoken accusations, of glances that felt like audits, of a home that had transformed from a sanctuary into a crime scene, where I was both the perpetrator and the sole witness. David became a ghost of his former self, or perhaps he revealed the man he had always been beneath the surface of our comfortable life. He was no longer my husband. He was my warden, my judge, and the architect of a punishment I was only beginning to comprehend. I ended the affair in a burst of panicked, static-filled phone calls from my car, my words tumbling over each other. "He knows it's over. Don't contact me again." Julian's voice, once the source of such intoxicating warmth, turned clinical and distant, a businessman severing an unprofitable contract. I understand. Take care of yourself, Eliza. The line went dead, and with it, the last flicker of the false reality I had built. The thrilling secret was now just a sordid mistake, and the emptiness it left behind was vast and cold. Returning home each day was an exercise in psychological torture. David would be there, always calm, always contained. He asked polite questions about my day, but his eyes were conducting a forensic analysis of my every twitch, every hesitation. He was letting me hang myself with the rope of my own anxiety. I was waiting for the explosion, for the tears, for the slammed door, but it never came. His silence was a slow, tightening vice. This, I realized, was the true beginning of his plan. Observation had been the preamble. This was the enactment. The first concrete strike was so elegantly cruel, it took my breath away. It was a Tuesday, and I was at the gallery attempting to lose myself in the precise, beautiful logic of arranging a new collection of minimalist sculptures. Margot, the owner, and my friend for a decade, called me into her office. Her face, usually a map of warm enthusiasm, was pale and strained. "Eliza, please sit down," she said, her voice soft with a genuine pain that immediately set my nerves on fire. "I have to tell you something, and it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do." She took a deep breath. "The board is restructuring. Our primary financial backer, a holding company that came on board last year, has invoked a clause in our operating agreement. They're insisting on a change in curatorial leadership." I felt the world tilt. "What, Margot? Our numbers are stellar. The reviews for the last show were incredible. This doesn't make any sense." "I know," she whispered, leaning forward, her hands clasped tightly. "I fought this, Eliza. I screamed at them over the phone, but the contract is ironclad. They have the majority voting rights. They were specific. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." A cold clarity washed over me. "What is the name of the holding company?" I asked, my voice strangely steady. She told me a bland, anonymous string of letters. Culper Holdings. It meant nothing to the world, but everything to me. I knew with a certainty that felt like a physical blow to the chest that it was David's, my husband, the silent partner in my passion. He had not just funded my sanctuary, he had owned it, and now he was foreclosing. I was escorted from the building by a sympathetic but firm security guard, a single cardboard box in my arms holding the dusty remains of my professional self, a framed photo, a favorite mug, a stack of art postcards. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the gallery doors, my life as I knew it receded behind the polished glass. He hadn't just fired me. He had erased me from the one place where I still felt like Eliza. When I arrived home, shrouded in a fog of shock, David was in the kitchen, meticulously juicing limes. He looked up, his expression one of mild inquiry. "You're home early," he noted, as if commenting on the weather. "I lost my job," I said, the words ash in my mouth. He nodded slowly, turning back to his juicer. "The market can be volatile." "I'm sorry to hear that." The apology was so empty, so utterly devoid of human connection, that it was more terrifying than any outburst of rage. He was sorry in the way one might be sorry for a distant acquaintance's misfortune. The casualness of it was a weapon. That night, a cold, pragmatic fear took hold. Money. I needed to see the money. I scrambled for my laptop, my fingers clumsy, and logged into our joint banking portal. The screen loaded, and for a moment, I thought I had typed the URL wrong. The balance displayed was a mockery. $2,147.32. Our shared savings, The nest egg we had built for over a decade, for a future that included children, a vacation home, retirement, was gone. I frantically pulled up the transaction history. There they were, a series of transfers over the preceding weeks, each one a surgical strike. $15,000 to an account labeled DWR Holdings, $20,000, $18,500. They weren't frantic, desperate withdrawals. They were calm, methodical, and systematic. He had not stolen the money. He had repatriated it. He had left me with a sum so pitiful it felt like a deliberate, calculated insult. I found him in his study, not working, but reading a book on Byzantine history. I thrust the laptop screen toward him. "What is this?" My voice was a shattered thing. "David, where is my money? What have you done?" He glanced at the screen, then back to his book, as if I was showing him a mildly interesting insect. "I've reassigned our assets to reflect the new reality of our situation," he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. "It was a necessary consolidation. Our assets, you've taken everything. You've left me with nothing." He placed a bookmark in his book and finally gave me his full attention. His eyes were like chips of flint. "I've left you with precisely what you invested in this marriage emotionally for the last several months, Eliza. Nothing. I have simply reclaimed the capital I contributed to a partnership you unilaterally dissolved. You made your choices. These are the fiscal consequences." The word consequences was no longer an abstract threat. It was a cold, hard reality. He was not a betrayed husband. He was a CEO liquidating a failed venture. The final absolute blow arrived 3 days later by certified mail. It was from a law firm, and it contained a single devastating document, a recorded quitclaim deed. The words swam before my eyes. I remembered the afternoon he had brought it to me. He'd been so gentle, so convincing. "The bank needs this for the refinancing, my love. It's just a formality. It will save us thousands." I had been distracted, my phone buzzing with the message from Julian. I had signed with a flourish, a loving wife trusting her husband. I had signed away my home. The paper in my hands now stated that the property at our address was hereby solely and entirely in the name of David William Light. I had no claim. The garden I had planted, the kitchen I had painted, the porch where we'd spent summer evenings, it was all his. I found him in the bedroom packing a single large suitcase with an efficiency that spoke of meticulous planning. "You're leaving?" I asked, my voice a hollow echo. "No," he replied without looking up from his folding. "You are. I am granting you a 30-day license to occupy the apartment above the garage. It is unfurnished, but it has running water and electricity. It should provide you with sufficient time to find alternative accommodation." He finally turned to me, and in his gaze I saw the complete eradication of the man I had married. There was no emotion, only the cool satisfaction of a perfectly executed blueprint. Consider it a transitional allowance. He zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was the period at the end of the sentence of our marriage. "The keys to the main house, please." Like an automaton, I fumbled in my bag and handed him my keychain. He deftly removed the silver key to our front door and handed the rest back to me. "Goodbye, Eliza." He walked past me, down the stairs and out the front door. I heard the engine of his car turn over, the sound growing fainter until it was swallowed by the evening silence. I stood alone in the center of the bedroom, in the house that was no longer mine. My career, ashes, my financial security vaporized, my marriage a nullity. His revenge was not a crime of passion. It was a masterclass in cold, legal, administrative annihilation. He had not just left me, he had systematically dismantled the very infrastructure of my life. And he had done it all without ever raising his voice. The demolition was complete, and I was buried in the rubble. The apartment above the garage was a tomb of dust and echoes. For 30 days, I moved through the sparse rooms like a ghost. Each sunrise, a hammer blow counting down to my final exile. The silence was a physical weight. I had no job to go to, no friends to call, while the shame was a barrier I couldn't cross. I was just waiting, trapped in the purgatory he had designed. On the final morning, a registered letter arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting a final cold eviction notice. But the words I read stole the air from my lungs. Eliza, Project Penance is complete. The house is yours again. The money has been returned. Your job awaits you. I have not done this out of forgiveness, but because destruction is not who I am. I build. I am building a new life, and I am giving you the materials to rebuild yours. True strength is in understanding a flaw so profound and choosing not to let it define the entire structure. I hope you find a better foundation. There was no signature. I sank to the floor. The sobs that tore from me were not of joy, but of utter devastating defeat. He had won. His revenge was not in taking everything, but in giving it all back. His mercy was the final masterful stroke. He had proven himself not just righteous, but magnanimous. I was left with a hollow victory, a house full of ghosts, and the crushing eternal knowledge that his character was unshakable, while mine had been fatally compromised. He had built me a prison of my own guilt, and he had handed me the key, knowing I would never truly be free.